A girl rode home on her bicycle and vanished without a trace. The police began their search, reviewing hundreds of hours of surveillance footage and trying to understand what had happened to her. Soon, they managed to find a tiny clue that ultimately turned the case around. And when the truth finally came to light, thousands of people were shocked by the turn of events. Mikki Shuney was born on May 21, 1990, in Lafayette, Louisiana, USA. She grew up in a happy and close-knit family. Her father was a scientist working in the oil industry, and her mother stayed at home with the children. Mikki had an older sister named Charlene. The girls looked very much alike and were sometimes even mistaken for twins. They'd often fought in childhood, but as they grew older, they became very close. Later, their parents had a son, and Mikki and her sister constantly helped their mother take care of him. Mikki was cheerful and lively, though a bit shy. She loved animals, especially horses, and tried to spend as much time with them as possible. The girl also adored cycling and often preferred to move around the city on her bike. After graduating from high school, Mikki enrolled in the University of Louisiana at the anthropology department. Since this educational institution was located in her city, she stayed to live with her parents. In May 2012, when Mikki was 21 years old, she was in her final year and preparing to graduate from university. She was also eagerly awaiting her birthday, which was just a few days away. On the 18th, Mikki decided to meet up with friends and visit a bar where local music bands were performing. The next morning, she was supposed to go with her family to her brother's high school graduation, so she didn't plan to stay at the bar for long. Mikki had a great time and decided to head home around midnight. Before leaving, she and a friend named Brettley decided to grab a bite to eat. They ordered food from Taco Bell, which was near the bar, and then went to Brettley's house. Mikki had her bicycle with her, which she planned to ride home. The boys' home was just a few minutes away from the bar. They went to his place, ate, and around 1:45 a.m., the girl headed home. In the morning, her entire family was getting ready to go to the graduation, but they quickly noticed that Mikki had not returned. Her room was empty, and her bicycle was nowhere to be found. The girl's parents assumed she had simply stayed overnight with friends and would come directly to her brother's school. Before heading to the graduation, they sent her a message, but no reply came. Mikki was also not at the school, and her relatives began to worry seriously. The girl was very responsible and was unlikely to miss such an important event as her brother's graduation, without a very good reason. When her family returned home, Mikki was still not there. They tried to call her, but she did not pick up the phone. After that, they called all her friends, but none of them had seen the girl since that night. Hearing all this, Mikki's parents decided to go to the police around 5 o'clock in the evening. Even though the girl was already an adult, the officers immediately took up her search and got to work. First, they spoke with all of Mikki's friends who were with her at the bar. Learning that she had gone home to Brettley's, investigators went to speak with the young man. He said that on that night, the girl had left his house at about 1:45 a.m. later. Their mutual friends were supposed to come over, and Brettley asked Mikki if she wanted to wait for them. However, she said that she needed to get up early in the morning for her brother's graduation and left for home on her bicycle. The police were hesitant to take the boy's word for it, as he could have been the last person to see Mikki before her disappearance. Brettley denied having anything to do with it and insisted that he had no reason to wish the girl harm. On the contrary, he'd expressed his concern about her deciding to ride home on her bicycle in the middle of the night. Despite the fact that the girl had not drunk any alcohol that evening, she was facing a journey of more than 6 kilometers through dark streets. The investigators began to check his story and first decided to review footage from all the surveillance cameras located along Mikki's presumed route. After long hours of reviewing the video footage, they managed to spot the girl. At 1:47 a.m., she passed a road near Brettley's house. A minute later, she was captured by another camera, but after that, the police could not find any more footage. Nevertheless, this was enough to confirm her friend's story. The investigators were convinced that Mikki had left his house and Brettley had nothing to do with her disappearance. After that, the police requested data on the girl's phone activity and learned that she had last used it a few minutes before leaving Brettley's house when another acquaintance called her. Meanwhile, Mikki's relatives were not sitting idle. They, along with friends and family friends, went out to search, combing the area along the girl's presumed route. Additionally, they printed flyers with information about her disappearance and distributed them on the streets and posted them on every corner. The police also surveyed the area along the road Mikki was supposed to have traveled. They were working on the theory that the girl might have been involved in an accident and trying to find her bicycle or any signs of a possible incident. Despite all this, the first day brought no results. By the next morning, Information about Mikki's disappearance was actively circulating in the local media. Several hundred concerned citizens joined the search for the girl, and a cash reward was offered for information about her whereabouts, which quickly reached $25,000. The university students where Mikki studied also participated in the search. Detectives tried to find any leads, and soon they noticed a peculiar detail. In the first surveillance footage, Mikki could be seen riding her bike towards her home, followed by a white pickup truck passing by in front of her. However, in the next recording, a few seconds after Mikki appeared in the frame, a similar vehicle passed behind her. Additionally, just 2 minutes later, this vehicle was seen driving in the opposite direction. Investigators speculated that this vehicle might be related to Mikki's disappearance, but they faced a significant problem. The quality of the camera recordings was very poor, making it impossible to discern even part of the license plate numbers. The police were only able to determine that it was a white Chevrolet pickup truck. They checked this model against their databases and found that over 3,000 such vehicles were registered in the area, further complicating their task. Given that it was practically impossible to identify the owner of the vehicle, detectives focused on finding other leads. Moreover, they did not know whether this pickup truck had any connection to the incident. Time passed, but there was no progress in the search. On May 21, 3 days after Mikki's disappearance, her birthday arrived. Instead of a joyful celebration, her family was in a state of despair, doing everything they could to find her. Despite all their efforts and the active work of the investigators, Mikki's fate remained unknown. This continued until May 27, when the police received a call. 2 men were fishing in a river about 40 kilometers from Lafayette. When one of them cast his line under the bridge, the hook snagged something heavy. The fisherman pulled out the object, which turned out to be a bicycle. Having heard about Mikki's disappearance in the news, they immediately contacted the police. Detectives quickly confirmed that the bicycle indeed belonged to the girl. Her relatives and numerous photos verified it. The police immediately noticed that the rear wheel was severely bent and speculated that the damage could have been caused by being hit by a car. They also realized that someone had deliberately dumped the bicycle in the river, far from the city, to conceal a possible crime. Detectives speculated that Mikki's body might also be in the water and deployed divers for a thorough examination of the river. However, this did not yield any results. Throughout this time, the police received calls with various tips. From the early days, they published a photo of the white pickup truck from the surveillance camera, asking the public to help identify the driver. At one point, they were informed that a man named Rocky owned a vehicle of the described model. The caller claimed that he had numerous DUI charges and was also awaiting trial for hitting a person. However, upon checking this lead, the police discovered that the caller had lied to them. Some time later, detectives received 2 more calls from different people, but both mentioned the same name, Brandon Lavern. The first caller was his future father-in-law. He reported that Brandon had disappeared for several days starting May 19, then returned with numerous injuries on his body. When asked what happened, Brandon said he was robbed at a gas station in New Orleans. The witness added that Brandon owned a white Chevrolet pickup truck, but he hadn't seen it since the man returned home. Instead, he saw something else. Brandon threw away a blood-stained shirt into a trash can. The next call came from an employee of a car dealership. He said that Brandon came in over the weekend wanting to get a new pickup truck, explaining that his old car had been stolen. When he was speaking to the employee, a news report about Mikki's disappearance started playing on a TV nearby, and Brandon began to visibly panic. Piecing these 2 leads together, the police immediately became interested in this individual. They quickly found out that the 33-year-old man lived in a small town about an hour-and-a-half drive from Lafayette and worked as a mechanic. He also purchased a new white pickup truck of the same make just a few days after the incident. Most importantly, Brandon was registered as a sex offender. In 1999, he broke into a woman's home, tied her up, and assaulted her, for which he served 10 years in prison. He was also suspected in the murder of another girl in 1999, but his involvement could not be proven. Half a year after that girl's death, he got married and a daughter was born. However, Brandon started to physically abuse his wife, leading her to file for divorce and obtain a restraining order against her former husband. Learning all this, the detectives decided to check Brandon's story about the robbery. Thanks to the detailed account of his future father-in-law, they learned the exact gas station where he claimed to have been attacked. However, surveillance cameras and employees did not confirm his story. After that, the police decided to speak with Brandon's sister, who told them a very strange story. According to her, her brother asked her to drive to Texas in another car because his vehicle was involved in a shootout and he needed to get rid of it urgently. When they arrived at a remote location, Brandon doused his pickup truck with fuel and set it on fire, then got into his sister's car and they drove away. The woman tried to find out what was happening, but her brother remained silent. Instead, he asked her not to tell anyone about the incident and also demanded that if the police asked, she should say he was at home on the night of May 19 and that she could confirm it. The sister agreed in exchange for Brandon forgiving a $300 debt she owed him. However, detectives quickly broke the sister by threatening charges for complicity. The woman pointed them to the place where they burned the pickup truck, and the police indeed found what was left of it. Unfortunately, the fire destroyed any potential evidence that could have been in the vehicle. But they still made some progress. Experts were able to recover the license plate number and confirm that the vehicle belonged to Brandon. Furthermore, now the police could use street cameras that operated only on vehicle license plates. Thanks to this, they established that Brandon was in Lafayette on the evening of the 18th. He appeared on one of the cameras around 5 p.m., and here the detectives got a significant clue. From the camera shot, they saw the contents of the pickup's open trunk. There was a spare wheel, a portable refrigerator, and a box. Looking at the footage of Mikki, the police established that the trunk of the pickup following her had the same items, placed in the same positions. Considering that, according to a witness, Brandon had serious injuries on his body, detectives decided to call local hospitals, and here they were waiting for another breakthrough. One of the hospitals confirmed that Brandon indeed sought their help less than a day after Mikki's disappearance. According to doctors, he had serious knife wounds. All the collected information unequivocally pointed out that the story of a robbery and trip to another city, which Brandon told his future relative, had nothing to do with reality. They had confirmations that not only was the man in Lafayette, but he was directly behind Mikki on the night of her disappearance. However, the police understood that all these facts did not prove his involvement in the girl's murder. The pickup, which could have contained DNA traces and other evidence, was burned. Mikki's whereabouts remained unknown, and the investigators could not say with certainty that she was no longer alive. Therefore, detectives were afraid to arrest the man or even interrogate him. Brandon might simply flee, realizing he was suspected. However, soon the police found another reason to detain the suspect. It turned out that in 2000, he failed to register as a sex offender at his place of residence, which was a violation of the law. The detectives acted very carefully. First, they discreetly placed a tracking device on his vehicle, then asked a patrol officer to stop him for a document check and arrest him for the 2000 law violation. When Brandon was in custody, the investigators in Mikki's case finally began to interrogate him. But despite all their efforts, the man repeatedly denied any involvement in the girl's disappearance. Realizing he wouldn't crack, detectives eventually decided to move forward with the case to trial with the circumstantial evidence they had. Despite the detectives' efforts, Brandon repeatedly denied any involvement in Mikki's disappearance. Realizing he wouldn't confess, the detectives decided to take the case to court with the circumstantial evidence they had. The chances of securing a conviction were slim, so the police focused all their efforts on finding new evidence in Mikki's body. In a last attempt in August, the prosecution offered Brandon a deal, a life sentence instead of the death penalty in exchange for confessing to Mikki's murder. Brandon discussed this with his lawyer and agreed to the deal. On August 7, he began to speak, first revealing the location of Mikki's body. The police went to a small cemetery about 70 kilometers from Lafayette and indeed found Mikki's buried body near it. Despite the decomposition, experts determined she had received multiple sharp blows, and the cause of death was a gunshot to the head. However, they were unable to find any foreign DNA on her body. The fact that Brandon directed them to the exact burial site nearly unequivocally indicated his involvement. Brandon then told them what happened on the night of May 19. He first told a story no one believed to be true. He claimed to have accidentally hit Mikki while driving drunk. She wasn't seriously injured and asked him not to call the police because she had illegal substances on her. Brandon offered to drive her home, and during the ride, they argued over the cost of repairing the bike. The situation escalated to the point where he accidentally killed her. The detectives immediately demanded the real story, threatening to void the deal otherwise. Realizing he couldn't escape, Brandon told the truth. He said he saw Mikki while driving, turned around, and intentionally hit her with his pickup. Although he didn't specify why, leading investigators to suspect his intent was to assault her. After she fell, Brandon quickly dragged her into his vehicle and threw her bike in the back. Mikki regained consciousness and tried to call 911, but Brandon threatened her with a knife. However, Mikki had pepper spray with her, which she used on Brandon, but he managed to knock it away. At the same time, Mikki grabbed his knife and stabbed him several times. Unfortunately, Brandon overpowered her, stabbing her multiple times. He checked her pulse, finding none, and drove out of town to hide her body. When he stopped in a secluded area, Mikki suddenly revived, grabbed his knife, and began stabbing him in the chest. Surprisingly, Brandon survived. He quickly grabbed his gun and shot her, causing her death. This narrative astonished even the most experienced detectives. Mikki was significantly shorter and weighed half as much as Brandon. Moreover, the man had served 3 years in the military and was well trained. Despite this, the girl put up an incredible fight. Brandon wanted to bury the body but quickly realized he barely had the strength to stand. He decided to go home, leaving Mikki in the car. Upon reaching home, he bandaged his wounds, then drove to the cemetery where her body would later be found. Unable to bury the body again, he felt he might lose consciousness at any moment, so he left the body in the bushes. After that, he went home again, called a friend to take him to a hospital in New Orleans to avoid attracting police attention in Lafayette. There, he told doctors a fabricated story about his injuries and received treatment. Upon returning home, Brandon disposed of the knife and gun, then went back to the cemetery to bury Mikki's body in the forest. As part of the deal, he also confessed to the murder of another girl in 1999, Lafayette, whom he had previously been suspected of killing. Brandon admitted to meeting Lafayette and taking her out of town. After spending a few days together, she wanted to return home, but Brandon refused to let her go. When she tried to take his keys, he noticed and strangled her. He later buried her body in a remote location. His confession matched the injuries on the victim's body and the location where it was found. After Brandon made his confession, he was standardly given a psychological evaluation. During his conversation with the specialist, he revealed that his stepfather regularly beat him and that he was molested by a babysitter when he was a child. From his teenage years, Brandon was diagnosed with depression and a tendency towards aggression. He became addicted to alcohol and illegal substances, further exacerbating his behavior. Despite all this, the specialist concluded that Brandon was aware of his actions and could be held accountable. On August 17, Brandon received 2 life sentences for the murders of Mikki and Lisa, with no possibility of parole. Since then, he has filed multiple appeals to overturn the verdict and unsuccessfully attempted to escape from prison in 2019. To this day, Brandon tries to convince everyone that he is not the monster portrayed by the media and deserves a second chance. When his confessions spread through the media, the case attracted even more attention. The determination with which Mikki fought for her life truly amazed millions of people around the world. She almost managed to stop someone physically much stronger than her. Unfortunately, she could not survive the encounter with this monster.